The sun was dipping low as I steered our car down the twisting roads toward the airport in Burlington, Vermont. A quiet had blanketed the countryside, with tall pines throwing long shadows over the pavement. My mind was wandering, half caught in a daydream, when a deer darted out from the woods, right into our path. I yanked the wheel hard, heart pounding. There was a sudden lurch, the scream of rubber on asphalt, and then, nothing. Next thing I knew, I was blinking into harsh white light, the sharp smell of antiseptic stinging my nose, a steady beep filling the air, and a heavy, throbbing pain radiating through my body. I was flat on my back in a hospital bed, feeling like I was floating outside myself, disoriented and groggy. A nurse came into focus, her face soft as she leaned in. "You're in a military hospital in Rome, Italy," she said gently. My head was pounding, my right arm and leg locked in casts, my chest tight with every shallow breath. Later, I'd find out I had a punctured lung and a mess of broken bones, but right then, I couldn't even piece together my own name. As the haze in my head started to clear, I croaked out to the nurse, "How long have I been here?" She fiddled with my 4 and said, 6 days. I swallowed hard, then asked, "Has my wife been by?" The nurse shook her head, her voice steady. "No, sir. We informed her right after you were admitted, though. She knows you're here." My throat felt like sandpaper as I rasped, "Can I get my phone?" She handed me a plastic bag with my stuff. I dug through it, hands shaking, until I found my phone and dialed Sarah's number. She answered fast, her voice breaking. "Mike, are you okay?" I tried to keep my tone even. "I'm hanging in there. What about you? You okay? The baby?" Her voice shattered into sobs. "Mike, we lost her. The baby's gone. I'm so sorry." It felt like the room caved in, stealing my breath. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Finally, I managed, "Are you okay?" Sarah's voice was faint. "I think so. I'm back home now. They won't let me travel, or I'd be there with you." I pressed, barely whispering, "What happened?" She sighed, her words heavy. Everything seemed fine, then the nurses started rushing around. One of them gasped, and it was chaos. They said the cord got tangled. I groped for something to say. "But you're sure you're all right?" After a long pause, she murmured, "My body's fine, but I'm broken inside." I asked, "When can I see you?" She hesitated. "I don't know. They haven't cleared me to fly. Should I try to come?" I shook my head, though she couldn't see. "No, stay put. I just need you to be okay, Sarah." 3 weeks later, after grueling recovery and medical approval, I was airlifted back to the States on a medevac flight. Sarah met me at the air base and rode with me to Fort Carson Hospital in Colorado Springs. She looked frail, her face shadowed, eyes red and weary from crying. One quiet afternoon in my hospital room, I asked softly, "Did you name her?" Sarah nodded, her voice trembling. "Yeah, I called her Grace." We both broke down, tears spilling freely. After another 3 weeks, I was discharged with light duty, no field ops, just desk work and slow physical therapy as my bones knitted back together. My body was healing, but the rift between us took longer to mend. Still, we held tight to each other, like folks clinging to wreckage in a storm. Time trudged on, and the raw pain dulled to a constant ache. I got promoted to major, and we were sent to Vicenza, Italy, for 3 years. We made the best of it, traveling when we could, chasing small joys amid the grief. It was good, or at least we made it good. Eventually, new orders came, and we relocated to Fort Riley, Kansas. The officer housing was a step up, real space, a garage, a place that felt like a home, not just a pit stop. We started unpacking crates shipped from Italy, plus boxes we'd stashed in storage years back. Sarah went to a spouse's meet and greet at the officers' club that night, hoping to make friends and find some normalcy. I stayed behind, tackling the chaos of cardboard boxes stacked like a fortress in our living room. While rummaging through an old crate, I spotted a small wooden box I didn't recognize, its edges smooth and latch delicate. Curious, I set it on the kitchen table and flipped it open. Inside was a stack of envelopes bound with a soft blue ribbon. I untied it and pulled out the first one. It wasn't sealed. What I saw inside stopped me cold, an official birth certificate. It said a baby girl, 7 pounds 8 ounces, 20 inches long, was born alive on the same day Sarah told me our daughter hadn't survived. The name listed was Grace. The mother was Sarah Marie Conway. Under my father's name, it just said unknown. At the bottom, 2 tiny inked footprints stared back at me. I sank into a chair, the paper trembling in my hands, my pulse hammering in my skull. It felt like the floor had dropped out. After a minute, I grabbed the next envelope, also unsealed. Inside was a pile of legal papers, including an adoption certificate. I read it, then read it again, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. It stated that a baby girl named Grace, born to Sarah Conway, had been given up for adoption. All parental rights were terminated. Since the father was listed as unknown, my consent wasn't required. The terms were ironclad, no contact, no details about the adoptive family, nothing. I kept digging. The other envelopes held letters, dozens of them, all in my handwriting, ones I'd sent Sarah during my deployments. My hands shook as I stared at those papers Sarah had stashed away, hidden in that little wooden box. It hit me like a freight train, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment choice. She'd planned it all, signed the forms, sealed the deal, all while keeping me in the dark. If she'd already decided to give our daughter up, what else was she hiding? Was there someone else? Had she been living a whole other life behind my back? My chest felt like it was caving in, the air too thick to breathe. I shoved everything back into the box and snapped it shut. That's when I saw the writing scrawled on the lid in a Sharpie, Sarah's keepsakes and old mementos. If I'd noticed that first, I might have left it alone. Maybe I was never meant to find it. Maybe every marriage, no matter how tight, has secrets you're better off not knowing. I slid the box back into the pile, shuffling the other crates to cover my tracks, then stepped out onto the porch. The Kansas evening air was cool, brushing my face, but it did little to quiet the storm raging inside me. The house felt suffocating, the truth screaming in my ears. What do I do now? How do I even bring this up without blowing our life to pieces? How do you call someone out on a lie this big? Worse, what if she had reasons I couldn't wrap my head around? I couldn't go to my folks with this, they'd lose it. I'm their only kid, their whole world pinned on me. They'd been dreaming of a grandkid for years, and this would gut them. Sarah's parents? No chance. We'd never been close, and they're not the type to let things slide. Friends? We didn't have any real ones, not after years of military moves shredding every connection we tried to make. I stayed out there on the curb, hunched over, arms dangling like they weighed a ton, until well after dark. Sarah's car finally pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing through the night. She cut the engine, hopped out, and spotted me sitting there like a ghost. "Hey, hon," she said, bending to peck my cheek, acting like everything was normal. "Get much done with the boxes today?" "Enough," I snapped, my voice cutting sharper than I meant. She froze, her eyes scanning my face, waiting for me to say more. I didn't, so she turned and headed inside without another word. It was over an hour before I dragged myself back in. First thing I noticed? That wooden box was gone from the stack. "We got invited to a welcome barbecue this Saturday," Sarah called out, her tone casual but her eyes watching me like a hawk. "Sounds fine," I mumbled, barely listening. "The Carlsons from Vicenza are here now." "Remember them?" she pressed, like I cared. "Not really," I said, avoiding her gaze. "She played cards with me. He was a G2 major. Tim and Ellen," she added, pushing harder. "Oh, yeah, maybe," I muttered. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing, finally sensing the weight I was carrying. "You okay, Mike? Something happened today? You're acting off." I wanted to yell, "You've got no clue, and I'm gonna dig until I know everything." But I swallowed it down and said, "Just a bad day. Feeling rough, that's all. Want some dinner? Or we could hit the officers' club." She offered, like a meal could fix this. "Not hungry," I said, already heading for the bedroom. "Gonna crash." I face-planted onto the bed, still in my clothes, and must have blacked out. When I woke, it was 1:30 a.m. I didn't move until 9:30, way later than my usual. I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. Eventually, I showered and shuffled downstairs. Sarah was in the kitchen, pouring coffee. "Want breakfast?" she asked. "Just coffee," I said, shaking my head. Her eyebrows shot up. "I never skip breakfast." She sat across from me, her eyes studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "Something's eating at you," she said softly. "Talk to me. Maybe I can help." "Just got a lot on my mind," I grumbled, standing to dump my untouched coffee in the sink. I headed for the garage, her voice trailing after me. "I'm here if you need me, Mike." I drove straight to the base golf course in Fort Riley, parked, and wandered into the clubhouse diner. I ordered something I hadn't touched in years: 2 eggs, corned beef hash, and black coffee. Back when we first got married, it was my go-to, but Sarah's no beef rule had taken over our kitchen. Today, I didn't care. I needed to feel like me again, not this stranger unraveling in my own life. I ate most of it, then stepped out to the patio, watching golfers finish up on the 18th hole. The quiet gave my head some room to breathe. When I got home, the sun was blazing. Sarah had made a dent in the unpacking. The place was starting to look like a real house. But as I walked through, all I could see was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, a mini version of Grace, giggling as she ran through these rooms. The thought of Grace out there, alive, twisted my gut so bad I barely made it to the bathroom before I lost everything I'd eaten. I was hunched over, heaving, when Sarah's hand touched my back. "Don't touch me!" I barked, just before another wave hit. I hadn't thrown up like that since my high school graduation party, and back then, it was cheap beer, not betrayal. When I was done, I stumbled upstairs, rinsed my mouth, scrubbed my teeth. Sarah was in the living room, a tissue pressed to her face, tears streaming. I didn't stop, didn't look at her, just blew past and headed for the garage. As I backed the car out, she appeared in the rearview, her voice shaky. "I can't help you if you won't talk to me, Mike." I didn't slow down. She stepped aside, and I peeled out. I drove straight to my unit at Fort Riley. The place was a ghost town except for the duty officer. I sat at my desk, staring at reports I couldn't focus on, my brain stuck on that box, that birth certificate, those tiny footprints. I stayed there past midnight, the questions eating me alive. When I finally got home, the house was pitch black. Sarah was in bed, a book open under the glow of the lamp. I walked right past her, didn't say a word, stripped down, and hit the shower. "I'll sleep downstairs," I mumbled, barely loud enough for her to hear, then shut the door behind me. I crashed on the couch, flipped on the TV, trying to drown out the noise in my head. Didn't last a minute before Sarah stormed in, snatched the remote from my hand, and shut the screen off. "That's enough," she said, standing there like she was ready to fight. "You either let me in or tell me to leave, but this silent treatment? No way. You don't get to shut me out like I'm the bad guy here. I haven't done anything to deserve this." I stood up, grabbed the remote back, and flicked the TV on. "Have a nice trip," I said, my voice cold as ice. Less than an hour later, she was gone, keys in hand, out the door. We'd never fought like that before. She'd never walked out. But this time, she did. Once I was sure she was gone, I headed to the basement. I tore through the storage crates until I found that wooden box. I pulled out the birth certificate and adoption papers, made copies on my old printer, and carefully put everything back exactly as it was. That night, I slept alone in our bed, the emptiness heavier than ever. Monday morning, I marched into my commanding officer's office and spilled it all, the documents, the lies, the questions tearing me apart. He looked floored. "I've only had you under me for a month, Mike," he said. "What's your next move?" I shook my head. "I don't know yet." She didn't say where she went, but she left that box behind. "I think I need to find my daughter. If she's really mine, that's where I start." He leaned back, frowning. "That's a tough road. Adoption records are locked tight, confidential." "I know," I said, "but I can't trust Sarah to tell me the truth anymore. I have to figure this out myself." Then it hit me like a spark. "Wait, I've got an idea. Can I take the day off?" He nodded. "Granted." I saluted, bolted down the stairs, and jumped in my car, a flicker of hope burning in my chest. Back home, I dug out the wooden box again. My hands shook as I opened it, dumping the contents onto the floor. Just one thing fell out, a small, faded pacifier, scratched and worn. I stared at it, picturing it in Grace's tiny mouth, maybe used in the short time before she was given away. I sealed it in a clear Ziploc bag, then went online, searching for a DNA testing lab nearby. I found one in downtown Topeka with solid reviews and fast results. Next, I rummaged through the bathroom. Sarah had cleared out everything, lotions, hair ties, even her toothbrush. But under the sink, buried in a drawer, I found an old hairbrush with a few strands of her hair tangled in it. I bagged those too. Without wasting a second, I grabbed both samples, hopped in the car, and drove to the city. At the lab, a technician named Carla greeted me. I handed her the pacifier first. She examined it carefully, gloved hands turning it over. "This might be tricky," she said. "Depending on how old it is, the DNA might not be viable, but we'll do our best." Then she checked the hair from the brush. "This should work fine," she said with a nod. She handed me a small vial. "Spit in here for your sample." I did as she asked, and she sealed everything in separate envelopes, labeling them with care. "We'll call you in about 3 weeks with the results," she said. I got back to Fort Riley late that night. Sarah didn't call until the next day. "Hey," I said, picking up. "Are you doing better?" "Better than what?" She shot back, her voice sharp. "Better than the jerk you turned into 2 days ago?" "Nope," I said, flat and hard. "Still that same jerk." "So, still not safe for me to come home?" She said, sarcasm dripping. "Not even close. Try again in 3 weeks." "Why 3 weeks?" she demanded. "Because by then I'll know if I'm done with you or just divorcing you." I just hung up, no hesitation. Sarah called back almost instantly after I hung up. I let the phone buzz, ignoring it. The next day, I pulled into the driveway at our Fort Riley house, and there she was, standing there, practically spitting fire. As soon as I stepped out of the car, she stormed over. "What was that garbage about eliminating me or divorcing me?" she yelled. "Exactly what I said," I replied, keeping my voice steady, standing my ground. "I deserve to know what's going on," she snapped. "And I deserve some answers too," I shot back, holding her gaze. "About what?" she demanded, her face a mix of anger and confusion. We weren't shouting, but the air between us was electric, heavy with everything we weren't saying. "You really think you don't owe me anything?" I asked, staring her down. "I'm trying to figure out what this is even about," she said, her brows knitting together. "So, no grace, huh?" I said, letting her daughter's name hit like a punch. Her face crumpled, the fight draining out of her. She looked gutted, eyes wide, body stiff. "Oh, God, no," she whispered. "I'm leaving for an hour," I said, brushing past her like she wasn't even there. "When I get back, I want you gone. I leave for work at 6:30 tomorrow. Be out of here by 5 p.m., with every last thing you own." I drove off, came back exactly an hour later, and she was gone, along with that wooden box and most of her stuff. She tried calling that night, probably a dozen times, but I blocked her number after the first ring. I needed to think. The next morning, I started the car at 6:30, the garage door creaking open. In the rearview, there was Sarah, standing behind the car. I inched backward, and she followed, hands pressed against the trunk. "Can we just talk, Mike, please?" she pleaded, her voice breaking. I didn't answer, didn't even look at her. Out of nowhere, 3 guys, neighbors or maybe friends she'd called, jumped out of a parked SUV and pulled her away from the car. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or pissed. That evening, the house was gutted. She'd taken almost everything, furniture, wall art, even the fancy dishes I never gave a damn about. She left my recliner, the spare bed, and the pots and pans I actually used. Her exit was precise, like she'd planned every cut to sting. The next morning, I called my office to say I'd be late, then contacted Base Housing to get temporary furniture. I made calls to the credit union, insurance, and my financial advisor, laying the groundwork for what I knew was coming, divorce. I booked a meeting with the JAG office on base. They couldn't represent me in civilian court, but they could give advice. The officer laid it out plain. "She'll probably get half," he said. "Even though you don't own the house, your cars and assets are marital property. Both cars were bought cheap in Italy during our posting there, and now I'd lose half their value." Later, my commanding officer pulled me aside. "Take whatever time you need," he said quietly. "Just keep me in the loop." For weeks, I moved through life like a zombie, doing my job, mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, but it all felt hollow. Then one morning, my phone rang. "Is this Major Mike Conway?" a woman asked. "This is Carla from the DNA lab in Topeka. Your results are ready. You can come in to review them." "Can't you tell me now?" I asked. "Sorry, sir, we need to verify your ID in person, or we can mail them," she said. I drove straight to the lab, asked for Carla. She greeted me with a polite smile, shook my hand, and asked for my military ID. I handed it over, and she led me to a small, bare room. A minute later, she came back with a sealed envelope and the pacifier in a bag, setting them on the table. Sample A is your DNA, she explained. Sample B is the hair. Sample C is the pacifier. I nodded, my stomach in knots. Samples B and C are biologically related, she said. Sample A shows no relation to either. I thanked her, grabbed the envelope and pacifier, and walked out. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, letting it sink in. Grace was real, she was Sarah's, but she wasn't mine. Some other guy was out there, maybe raising my daughter, calling her his own. I called the JAG office again. They gave me a list of vetted civilian lawyers. I contacted everyone, set up 6 meetings. The third guy clicked, a former JAG himself, no tolerance for liars, didn't care who they were. His voice was sharp, confident, exactly what I needed. I spent over an hour laying out the whole mess, start to finish. He didn't interrupt, just listened, his face growing harder with every detail. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. In 40 years of law, he said, his tone grim, I've never heard anything this calculated. This isn't just deceit, it's cold, deliberate cruelty. She's not just heartless, it's like she's missing a soul. But, he warned, family courts don't often side with the guy, no matter how right he is. The system seems built to grind him down to feel fair. That night, I got home and found an envelope in the mailbox, no stamp, just a handwritten note. Mike, 3 weeks are up. Sarah. The return address was her parents' place in Augusta, Maine. I dialed her number. Hi, Mike, she answered, like we were just catching up. I'm not doing this over the phone, I said, my voice flat. And I'm not flying to Maine. Sarah tried calling back right after I cut her off, but I didn't pick up. Guess you'll have to come here, she'd said in that last call. I'm in Topeka. I sent that note from there last week. After a beat of silence, I told her, be at the house by 6:30. She didn't say anything else, just hung up. I didn't bother setting out plates or pouring drinks. This wasn't some cozy catch-up, it was a showdown. On the plain military-issue coffee table, I spread out 3 things, the DNA results, the birth certificate, and the adoption papers. She pulled into the driveway at 6:20 but waited until exactly 6:30 to knock, like being on time could erase what she'd done. I opened the door without a word, pointed to the wooden chair across from me, and sank onto the couch. She sat on the stiff chair, fitting for the heavy air between us. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the pacifier, and held it out. Her face shattered like thin ice. She took it with trembling hands, pressing it to her chest like it was sacred. Thank you, she whispered, voice barely holding together. Then I slid the DNA results across the table. You already know what's in here, I said, but here's the proof, so there's no dodging it. She nodded slowly, like she was moving through quicksand, and took the envelope, still gripping the pacifier in her other hand. Your DNA, right? She asked, her voice brittle. Yup, I said, not breaking eye contact. I pushed the rest of the papers toward her, clean, sharp, final. She leaned forward, scanning the top sheet. The calm she'd been faking crumbled, her eyes filling, lips quivering. She set the DNA results aside and picked up the divorce papers. Tears blurred the ink as she tried to read. Got a tissue, she asked, like we were still playing nice. Nope, I said, cold as stone, even though the box was right there on the side table. She glanced at it, then at me, and knew I wasn't budging. Not gonna make this easy, are you? She said, barely keeping it together. You cheated, I said, flat, no feeling, just truth. She nodded, guilt hanging thick in the room. How many times? I asked. Does it matter? She murmured, voice cracking. Doesn't change much, but I still want to know, I pressed. 1 weekend. 2 guys. Just once, she said, staring at the table like it could shield her. Who are they? I asked. She studied the wood grain, avoiding my eyes. Does it make a difference? She whispered. I deserve to know, I said, my jaw tight. I'm not saying, she replied, quiet but firm. Do I know them? I pushed again. I'm not telling you that either, she said, still looking anywhere but at me. So you'd rather cover for them than try to save what's left of us? I shot back. She let out a tired sigh, her shoulders slumping, and glanced at the divorce papers. "There's nothing to save anymore," she said. "Telling you their names won't fix this. It'll just make you madder." "Then tell me about the real betrayal," I said, my voice low, cutting. "Why'd you lie about our daughter? Why'd you say Grace was born and gone?" She sat still, like the weight of it finally settled on her. "Yeah," she said slowly, "you deserve that." She got up, grabbed the tissue box I'd ignored, and set it in front of her. She pulled one out, wiped her face, still clutching the pacifier like it was all she had left. "When I found out I was pregnant, I freaked out," she started. "I didn't know if the baby was yours or his. I thought about ending it, but I couldn't go through with it. I kept telling myself it could be yours. When the ultrasound showed a girl, I started buying into my own lie." She paused, her breathing shaky. "I thought, maybe no one would know. Maybe she'd look like me, or even you, and you'd never suspect. I told myself dads and daughters have this special connection, and you'd love her no matter what." Her voice broke. "But as her due date got closer, I got scared. What if you saw her and just knew? Then you got deployed, and I was relieved. It bought me time. But when you said you were flying back for the birth, that relief fell apart. I was terrified again. What if you looked at her and it all unraveled?" She dabbed her eyes and went on. "When she was born, they placed her on my chest. She was perfect, soft blonde hair, bright blue eyes. I knew right then she wasn't yours." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But she was mine, and I loved her. God, I loved her. But I loved you too, and I had to pick." She stared at the pacifier. "I picked you." Sarah's words hung heavy, like a truth she'd buried for years finally clawing its way out. "I told the hospital I wanted to give her up for adoption," she said. "They moved fast. By the next day, they had the forms ready. When they asked about the father, I said I didn't know. They told me that made it easier, no signature needed." Her voice broke, trembling. She was feeding when they brought the papers. "I signed them all. When I reached to hold her one last time, the nurse stopped me. 'She's not yours anymore,' she said." Tears poured down her face, her shoulders caving in. "I reached anyway," she whispered. I grabbed the pacifier. "That's all I took, that and 2 photos on my phone. That's all I've got left." She broke, sobs shaking her whole body, the weight of it all spilling out. "God, forgive me," she choked. "I want my daughter back." I sat there, my heart cold, unable to speak. Her pain was raw, her guilt undeniable, but so was the knife she'd driven into my back. After a bit, I got up, went to the kitchen, and filled a glass with water. I handed it to her, and she took it with unsteady hands. "Thanks," she murmured. Her crying eventually slowed, her sobs fading to quiet sniffles. She sat still on the couch, wrapped in the blanket I'd tossed over her. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I knew I couldn't keep it hidden forever," she said. "So I told you Grace was stillborn, said she was cremated. It was simpler than the truth." She glanced at me, eyes glassy. "When you got home and didn't ask for any documents, no birth certificate, no death record, I was shocked. I thought you'd push for answers." "I didn't think I had to," I said. "You were my wife. I trusted you." She nodded faintly, more shame than anything else. "And you were hurting too," she said. "You'd been through hell. I figured you didn't want to poke at it." Life went on, found its rhythm. Things seemed normal, at least on the outside. But something was always missing, and that hole just got louder. Her eyes drifted to the pacifier on the table. Every year on her birthday, I'd pull out her birth certificate and hold this pacifier. I'd trace her tiny footprints, just to feel close to her. I even thought about putting it in my mouth, to feel her somehow. It still had a bit of dried milk on it. I couldn't lose that. She looked away, her voice spiking with panic. "But now it's gone," she said. "They must have cleaned it off for the DNA test." Her eyes snapped to mine, wild and empty. "Oh my God," she gasped. "It's gone." She glared at me like I'd stolen her last tether to Grace. "You took her milk," she hissed. "That was hers. You took the last piece of her I had." She collapsed to the floor, her cries raw and jagged. I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. Then I knelt, gently lifted her, and set her back on the couch. I draped the blanket over her again and left the room. I couldn't watch her fall apart, but I couldn't abandon her either. I holed up in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Sleep never came. Hours dragged by, midnight passed. I heard the bathroom door creak, then the soft flush of the toilet. I went downstairs. Sarah was on the couch, sitting up, blanket around her shoulders, eyes red but steady. "Coffee?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Yeah, please." She followed me to the kitchen and sat at the counter while I brewed a pot. I handed her a mug, and she sipped it, offering a faint smile. "I kinda lost it back there, huh?" she said. "You could say that," I replied. We sat in silence for a bit. "Need a refill?" I asked. "Sure, thanks," she said. I poured her another. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "A motel just off base," she said. "Been there the whole 3 weeks?" "No, mostly with my parents," she said. "They covered the trip." "Do they know what really happened?" She shook her head. "No," I lied. "Told them we were just hitting a rough spot, and needed a break. They think I came back to fix things." She didn't say more. Instead, she got up, walked to the coffee table, pulled a pen from her bag, and signed the divorce papers without even skimming them. She gathered her stuff, the pacifier, her purse, and walked out. I stood there, then cleared the coffee mugs, washed them, and went to bed. Sunday morning, I woke up late. The house was dead quiet. I spent the day alone, my thoughts spinning until they finally slowed. Monday, I dropped the signed papers off with my lawyer, and they were filed. I also told Base Housing I wanted to move off post. I needed a clean break. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Sarah never showed up in court, didn't fight for anything. She took her car and whatever she'd grabbed when she left. A copy of the judgment was sent to her parents' place in Augusta, Maine. I never got a response. I tried to push her out of my mind, but one question gnawed at me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Who was the guy she cheated with? She never gave me a name, never explained why or how. The affair itself wasn't the worst part, nor was the pregnancy. It was the secrecy, her shielding him, choosing lies over truth. Just one weekend, she'd said, but that weekend broke everything. Work became my lifeline. The grind was brutal, and I leaned into it, leaving no room for resentment to fester. I didn't date, didn't go out. I just kept moving. The only time I felt like myself was once a week, joining Major Tom Bennett and his family for dinner. They were the kind of military family you picture in recruiting ads, warm, steady, tight-knit. Tom, his wife Clara, their 2 kids, a solid house, a kitchen that always smelled like fresh bread. Their son was 11, their daughter 9. Sure, they moved a lot, like all of us, always packing, settling into new schools, but they made it look easy. Tom and Clara had been married 13 years, and you could see they still had each other's backs. I wasn't sure what a normal family looked like anymore, but Tom Bennett's crew seemed pretty close. One night after dinner, Tom and I sat up late, shooting the breeze. Talk turned to TDY, temporary duty assignments, and how they yanked us away from home. After a while, they didn't feel like trips anymore, they felt like running from something. Tom mentioned he'd been picked for a 2-week security seminar at Fort Carson, Colorado. The next morning, I went straight to our commanding officer. "Sir," I said, "any reason I can't take Major Bennett's spot at that seminar?" "Not really," he replied. The general figured Tom had a bit more field experience, but if you want it, we can switch. "I do," I said. "It's their anniversary. Let them have it together." The CO chuckled. "Didn't peg you for a softie, Major Conway." 2 weeks later, I was at Fort Carson, the same place where Sarah had given birth to Grace. Being back felt like picking at a half-healed scar. The seminar was laid back, though. We were split into teams for a group project, 18 officers total. When the groups formed, 2 of us were left unpaired. That's how I met Major Ryan Caldwell. Ryan was stationed at Fort Greely, Alaska, the iciest post in the Army. He didn't mind the cold, said it sharpened his head. The guy was sharp, especially with tech, and we clicked right away. Our project outshined the others without much effort, we had to dial it back just to give the rest a chance. That Friday, we hit the officers' club for lunch. Somewhere between the sandwiches and coffee, Ryan dropped a bomb. "I stepped out on my wife," he said out of nowhere. She left me, took the kids. Now they're with some guy who's not in the service, and they call him Dad. His words hit like a brick. I knew that exact pain, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel so isolated. As we finished eating, I opened up about my own mess, the lies, the DNA test, the questions I couldn't shake, the closure I was chasing. Ryan just stared, floored. And you still don't know who the guy was? He asked, leaning in. Nope, I said. Sarah never gave me a name, not even a clue. This all happened at Carson, he said, piecing it together. Yeah, I nodded. 5, maybe 6 years ago. All I know is he had blonde hair, blue eyes. That's it. Ryan stood up fast. Let's go, he said. We're taking a drive. He drove us to the Manpower Center, where everyone tied to Fort Carson, military or civilian, passes through at some point. Inside, he led me to an office at the back. The nameplate read Mrs. Ellen Dorsey. Before I could ask what was up, the door swung open. A woman in her late 60s stepped out, all smiles, and pulled Ryan into a hug. Ryan, my boy, she said warmly. Aunt Ellen, Ryan grinned, stepping back. This is Major Mike Conway. She turned to me, her handshake strong and kind. Mike, great to meet you, she said. I'm Aunt Ellen to everybody, keeps things simple. Ryan got straight to it. Aunt Ellen, we're trying to find someone who might have been here about 6 years back. Blonde hair, blue eyes, male, probably military. She raised an eyebrow, a spark of amusement in her eyes. That's all you've got? No name, no rank, nothing? That's it, Ryan said. She looked at me, curious. Mike Conway, you were posted here with your wife, right? I nodded. Yeah, we were here together. Ryan chimed in, what I didn't mention is Aunt Ellen has HSAM. I blinked. You mean that supermemory thing? Highly superior autobiographical memory, Ryan confirmed. It's a way of living, Ellen said, her tone dry but warm. Or a pain, depending on the day, Ryan added with a laugh. Not many folks have it, he went on. But Aunt Ellen's like Fort Carson's walking database, especially for personnel. I turned to her, stunned. So you remember everything? She nodded. Every moment, every face, every file, every word, it's all up here. The trick isn't recalling, it's not letting the bad stuff drown you. That's wild, I said softly. How do you handle all that? Nobody's figured that out, she said with a shrug. But the tough part is carrying every joy and every hurt. Ryan jumped back in. Mike's trying to track down someone who might have been involved with his wife back then. All he's got is blonde hair, blue eyes. Ellen laughed, shaking her head. No height, no build, no job? That's thin, Mike. I know, I admitted. Sorry. She waved it off, still smiling. I've met a ton of guys who fit that look, but let me think about it. I'll poke around, see if anything clicks. I hesitated. You think it's even worth chasing after all this time? She looked at me, dead serious. If it's still eating at you, Mike, then it matters. Ryan gave me a small nod, then said to Ellen, anything you can dig up, we'd appreciate. She grabbed a notepad from her desk and jotted something down. Give me your numbers. I'll call if something pops. 2 days later, Ryan's phone buzzed. He answered and put it on speaker. Ryan? It's Ellen, her voice came through. I've been mulling over that guy you asked about. Any luck? Ryan asked. Well, she said, I can't think of any soldiers or officers with blonde hair and blue eyes that fit the timing or age. But I know 2 civilians who worked in the post engineer's office. One's been here since the 80s, too old, I'd say. The other's been around about a decade. He used to run the HVAC crew, now he's overseeing building projects. Name? Ryan asked. Paul Decker, Ellen said. Blue eyes, blonde hair, probably late 30s now. He's the closest match I can think of. There are other guys with that look on base, but none seemed right, and I didn't dig into off-post folks, figured Mike wouldn't have crossed paths with many civilians. Thanks, Aunt Ellen, Ryan said. Anytime, kid, she replied, then hung up. Ryan turned to me. Want to check this guy out? I nodded, my gut tightening. Yeah, I need to know. I need to see him. Ryan grabbed his phone again. Let's get his address. He called Ellen back. Can we get Decker's contact info? Sure thing, she said. I've got the civilian directory right here. Ellen rattled off Paul Decker's contact info, and Ryan hung up. You're the best, Aunt Ellen, he said. I owe you a meal. By 4 p.m., we were parked outside the post engineer's building at Fort Carson in Ryan's rental car, keeping an eye out. We didn't wait long. A tall guy with a sharp jawline stepped out, broad build, easy stride, tan skin, and that perfect blonde hair. He looked like the kind of guy you'd peg as trouble without needing a reason. That's him, Ryan muttered. We followed at a distance, careful not to crowd him. He drove straight to a nice but unflashy neighborhood in Colorado Springs. We parked a block away, close enough to keep tabs. He didn't come back out, but a woman, probably his wife, was outside pruning roses. 3 kids, all with the same blonde hair, chased each other in the yard. Ryan glanced at me. You sure about this? You don't have to stick around, I said quietly. He smirked. No way, man. I'm in. Already thinking up ways to rattle this guy. I gave a small grin. Got a few ideas of my own. We sat there, quiet, both chewing on our thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt like I was inches from the truth, and I was ready to face it, no matter what it cost. The next morning, I parked on a side street near Paul Decker's place. My plan was simple, wait him out. Maybe he was hitting the golf course or running errands. I was ready to camp there all day if needed. About 2 hours in, his garage door rolled up, and his gray SUV backed out. Finally, I thought. I wasn't thrilled about spending my Sunday playing private eye, but I'd have stayed till dark if that's what it took. I tailed him to a Home Depot, parking a few rows back, and followed him inside. The guy was clearly a regular, nodding at staff, calling them by name, even cracking a joke with a cashier near the entrance. He grabbed a cup of free coffee from a dispenser by the door and chatted with a salesman about drywall options. Then I noticed something small but annoying. He chewed gum like it was a competition, loud, mouth open, just obnoxious. It was the kind of habit that makes you dislike someone even if you don't already suspect them of wrecking your marriage. When the salesman stepped away, Paul finished his coffee, spit his gum into the cup, popped in a new piece, and headed toward the paint aisle. I glanced around, nobody was watching. I slipped over to the trash can, spotted his cup right on top with the gum still inside, and bagged it with a plastic Ziploc I'd brought. I was back in my car and pulling out when I called Ryan. I got something, I said. He laughed. Nice, because I've got something bigger. Get over here. Back at the bachelor officer quarters, Ryan was grinning like he'd just won a bet. He waved a stack of papers at me. You're gonna want to sit for this, he said. I dropped into a chair, and he handed me the documents. What's this? I asked. He tapped the top page. That's her name, her new name. Grace? I said, my voice catching as I read Emma Thornton. Her adoptive family, Ryan said, still grinning. Address, medical history, the works. My jaw hit the floor. How'd you pull this off? I didn't, he said. My brother did. Let's just say he's got a knack for getting into places he's not supposed to. The adoption agency's files were locked up tighter than a CIA vault, but he cracked it. No way, I said, half laughing, half dazed. Yup, Ryan said. Military-grade encryption didn't even make him blink. I shook my head, overwhelmed. This is unreal. But what now? Ryan leaned back. No clue, but we've got the truth. That's a solid start. Yeah, I said, still reeling. Now we just gotta make sure we don't end up in the news for Army officers dig up kid's identity for revenge. Ryan rolled his eyes and tossed the papers on the table. Fair point. No extortion schemes. I took the documents and a coffee cup back to my quarters, setting them on my desk. For some reason I couldn't pin down, I opened my laptop and punched the Thornton family's address into a map app. Waco, Texas, about 180 miles from Fort Carson. The next morning, I hit the road at dawn. By the time I got there, it was your typical suburban scene, tidy lawns, white fences, the smell of charcoal grills drifting through the air. I parked a block away from the Thornton family's house in Waco, Texas, and settled in to wait. Time crawled. Kids rode bikes, dads pushed lawnmowers, families came and went. Around noon, a blue SUV pulled into the Thorntons' driveway. A man was driving, a woman in the passenger seat, and a little girl in the back. The woman got out, opened the back door, and unbuckled the girl, smoothing her dress and fixing a clip in her blonde hair. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few quick pictures from inside the car. Then a noise made me jump. A woman and her kid were walking nearby. The kid spotted the girl by the SUV and squealed, "Emma." Emma Thornton turned, grinned, and ran to hug her friend, laughing just steps from where I sat. I took a couple more photos and peeled out before anyone noticed. A few streets over, I pulled over to check the shots. For were crystal clear, her blue eyes sharp as anything. I drove back to Fort Carson a few days later. Ryan and I breezed through the rest of the seminar, graduated on Friday, and grabbed beers that night. He flew back to Alaska on Saturday. I headed to Fort Riley. Monday was a school holiday, so I had the day off. I went straight to the DNA lab in Topeka with the original report and the coffee cup with Paul Decker's gum. The technician, Carla, didn't recognize me at first until I mentioned the pacifier. "Oh, right, you," she said, surprised. I handed her the new items. "I'll be back in 3 weeks," I said. But it only took 2. Carla called, her voice matter-of-fact. "It's a match. Mother, father, child, a biological trio. Full results are in the mail." That was it. Proof. Paul Decker was the father. Sarah had cheated with him, and Emma was their kid. I didn't know how to unpack it. I sat on it for days, my head spinning. Then it hit me. I stopped by a Walmart, grabbed a plain stationery set, blank paper, generic envelopes. Wearing gloves, I stripped all identifying info from the DNA report and copied the 2 best photos of Emma. I wiped everything down, no prints, no trace of me. I sealed the report and pictures in an envelope, addressed it to Mrs. Paul Decker, and included Sarah's name and her parents' address in Augusta, Maine, just in case someone needed to follow the trail. I drove to the Maine post office in Topeka and dropped it in the mailbox. Done. I had no idea what would happen when that envelope hit Mrs. Decker's hands in Colorado Springs. All I could hope was that she'd be the one to open it. Deep down, I wanted her to tear Paul apart. I wanted his life to crack open, his wife to rage, to make him pay. His kids? I felt for them, they didn't ask for this. But him? I hoped he'd feel the heat. A month later, my phone rang. Caller ID showed Ellen Dorsey. Her voice was sharp. "Mike, I need to ask you something, and I want the truth." "I'll do my best," I said, bracing myself. "No games. Did you and Ryan send something to Paul Decker's wife or do anything to spark a divorce?" I paused, then said, "Ryan had no part in it. Whatever happened, it was just me." I gave her most of the story, careful not to drag Ryan into it. If there was fallout, I'd take it alone. "Well," Ellen said with a sigh, "you stirred up a hell of a mess." Her tone wasn't mad, more like she'd seen worse and found it half amusing. When Mrs. Decker got that envelope, she didn't know whose DNA she was looking at, yours, her husband's, someone else's. So she played it smart. Got her husband's DNA herself, ran another test, sent in samples for him, the woman, and the kid. She paused, then hit me with it. They matched. I didn't say anything, there wasn't much to say. That's when it all fell apart, she added quietly. Then, softer, almost hesitant, she asked, "Do you know who the woman was? The one he was with?" "Yeah," I said without missing a beat. "She was my wife, Ellen." A sharp breath came through the line. "Oh, Lord," she murmured. I had a hunch, but I hoped I was wrong. She took a moment, then went on. "Well, Paul was called into the office yesterday, and he didn't take it well. He's been storming around base, ranting like the world's out to get him." "Good," I said flatly. "If his marriage going up in flames is the worst thing he's dealing with, that's the best news I've heard in months. I just feel bad for his wife and kids, they didn't deserve this." For me, it was over. Sarah and I were done, the divorce papers long signed. Now it was Paul's turn to face his mess. I took the folder Ryan had given me, documents, reports, everything, and tucked it into a box with a few other things I couldn't toss but didn't want to stare at. It was time to move on. The past wasn't going anywhere, but it didn't own me anymore.